Hey folks, PC here, and I've been putting in some serious hours with Avowed, Obsidian's new first-person action RPG. And honestly, my thoughts are a bit of a mixed bag. I gotta say, visually, this game is a knockout, and the combat, super fun, and gives you a lot of ways to play. But, and there's always a but, right? The story and some of the technical stuff just didn't quite hit the mark for me. Let's dig a little deeper and I'll tell you exactly what I mean about my experience with Avowed. So the game drops us into the Living Lands, a fresh region with Eora, which is pretty cool, not gonna lie. There's this scary dream scourge thing messing with reality, and you play as an envoy from a deer sent to figure it out. The premise is definitely interesting, setting up for some tough choices and moral questions. However, the story itself kinda plays out in a pretty standard way. The main quests often hit familiar story beats, and the bad guys you face aren't as complex or thought-provoking as you might expect from an Obsidian game. It adds some interesting background lore, but how it wraps up feels too simple, missing those branching paths and morally ambiguous choices that make games like Pillars of Eternity so great. The side quests also show promise, but often end up being pretty straightforward. And while you get tons of dialogue options, they don't usually change the story in big ways, making the world feel a bit less reactive. Plus, the companions you meet, even with their sad backstories, don't really grow or change in a super deep way throughout the game, especially when you compare them to the really well-developed characters Obsidian is known for in their other games like Fallout New Vegas and The Outer Worlds. Avowed gives you a lot of freedom in creating your character right from the start. You can tweak everything from facial features to cultural markings that hint at your godlike ancestry. Interestingly, your chosen background, like being from the Animancers or a hunter, even changes some dialogue options, adding a bit of flavor to conversations. However, while these choices are cool for setting the scene, they don't really change how the game plays. For example, picking an ex-soldier might give you a slight combat edge at the beginning, but it doesn't fundamentally alter your fighting style or how you interact with the world in terms of gameplay. The game does have a classless system, letting you mix and match abilities from different skill trees, which is great for player freedom, but because your character's backstory isn't really connected to the abilities you learn, your initial choices can feel a bit shallow. There's no real sense of your background shaping your journey in a meaningful way. Imagine if choosing a mage background unlocked special spell combos or unique lore insights. That kind of depth just isn't there in Avowed. Plus, the fact that you can change your appearance whenever you want using in-game mirrors while convenient kind of highlights that some of the customization is just for looks. Avowed offers a wide range of options to make your character look unique, but these choices don't really go deep enough to impact the actual gameplay or story in a significant way. It ends up feeling like the customization is more about surface level changes than truly shaping your character's experience. Visually, I gotta say, Avowed is really something to look at. The landscapes are just gorgeous, from these lush green jungles to these spooky, foggy swamps, especially where the Dream Scourge stuff is happening. It's got that same cool mix of fantasy and realism that you saw in Pillars of Eternity, which I really dig. The characters look pretty expressive and the environments just make you want to wander around and explore. But sometimes the technical side kinda trips things up a bit. You might see textures popping in sometimes, or the frame rate can dip, especially when there's a lot going on like in busy towns or big fights. It can pull you out of the moment a little, which is a shame because the world itself is so immersive. Sound-wise, it's really well done and fits the visuals nicely. The music changes depending on where you are and what's happening in the story. You get these haunting tunes in the darker areas, and then epic music kicks in during battles, which really amps up the intensity. Now, the voice acting is a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. Some characters are voiced really well with a lot of emotion, like Gyata. She's great, but then other characters just sound kind of generic, you know? It could take you out of the story a bit when that happens. Okay, let's dive into the gameplay of Avowed. And honestly, this is where the game really shines, especially when it comes to combat. They've built a system that's just really fun to play around with. You've got your melee weapons, ranged attacks, magic spells, all kinds of options to create your own fighting style. Like you could be dual-wielding pistols, blasting away at enemies, then BAM! Switch to a sword and shield for some up-close action, all while throwing in spells to control the flow of battle. The cool thing is how smooth it is to switch between all these weapons and abilities in the middle of a fight. It makes every encounter feel really dynamic and engaging, and the combat itself just feels good. Melee hits have this satisfying weight to them, and when you cast a spell, you really feel the impact. It keeps combat fresh and exciting, even when you're in a lot of fights. Now, while the combat is definitely a highlight, I think the exploration and how you interact with the world around you is a little less impressive. There are moments where the world feels alive and interesting, like stumbling upon hidden caves with cool puzzles or bits of lore, but honestly, these moments aren't as common as you'd hope. The world in Avowed is beautiful, no doubt, but sometimes it feels like it's missing that extra layer of interactivity or mystery to really make exploration super rewarding. You might find these ancient ruins, for example, but usually it just boils down to fighting enemies or solving a pretty simple puzzle, rather than giving you different ways to actually engage with the environment itself. And then there's the AI, especially with your companions. It's a bit of a mixed bag, I gotta say. They can definitely be helpful in fights, offering support and drawing enemy attention, but sometimes their decision making is questionable. They might just run headfirst into danger for no reason or completely miss obvious threats. So managing your party can sometimes feel more like babysitting than having actual allies by your side, especially in tougher battles where you really need everyone to work together. Even with these points though, the core gameplay, the combat, and how your character gets stronger is solid. It's a strong foundation, and if they can polish up some of these other areas, Avowed could really become a top tier game in the genre. Alright, let's break down the mechanics in Avowed. Overall, the game gives you a pretty solid foundation to work with, especially when it comes to building your character. The skill tree is massive, letting you invest in all sorts of abilities across different schools like Arcana, Might, and Finesse. This is really cool because you can get creative and make some unique character builds. Want to be a sneaky rogue who also slings spells? Go for it. Or maybe a heavily armored mage. Totally doable. It definitely opens up some fun possibilities for how you want to play. However, as you progress, the skill upgrades can feel a little gradual, you know? It's missing those big wow moments where you unlock a new ability that completely changes how you play the game. A few more of those game-changing skills could have made the progression feel a bit more exciting and impactful. The gear system is similar. It's got potential, but it doesn't quite hit the mark in every way. You find armor and weapons in different rarities with stats and perks to customize your build, which is nice, but sometimes the difference between items can feel pretty small. It can start to feel like you're just on a gear treadmill, constantly swapping items for tiny stat boosts rather than making really exciting discoveries that change your gameplay. Like you might find a legendary sword, but it just gives you a little bit more damage instead of some unique effect that really shakes things up. And while I appreciate that you can switch your loadouts on the fly, the inventory itself can get a bit messy, especially with all the loot you pick up. It can be a bit of a hassle to sort through everything, and it's not always clear which gear is actually going to be best for your build. A better way to organize things, or maybe some clearer hints about what gear is useful, would really help make managing your inventory less of a chore and more of a fun part of getting stronger. So in a nutshell, Avowed has some really good core mechanics that give you a lot of freedom to build your character and play how you want, but a few tweaks and refinements, especially to the progression and gear systems, could really evaluate the whole gameplay experience and make it even more engaging. So wrapping things up, Avowed is a game that's got me in a bit of a back and forth. On one hand, it's seriously stunning to look at, and the combat, definitely a blast, especially with all the ways you can customize your fighting style. Obsidian nailed the visual world and the action, no doubt about it. But on the other hand, the story didn't quite grab me as much as I hoped, and there were a few moments where the technical side felt a little rough around the edges. It's like Avowed is right there knocking on the door of being truly amazing, but it just doesn't quite reach the legendary status of some of Obsidian's other RPGs that we all know and love. Now, if you're in the mood for a solid action RPG with a world that's just begging to be explored and combat that keeps you on your toes, Avowed absolutely delivers on that front. You'll have a good time, no question. However, if you're really diving into games for those deep, twisting narratives and choices that reshape the world around you, you might find yourself wanting a little bit more from the Living Lands. Don't get me wrong, I'm still glad I jumped in and experienced it for myself, but a part of me can't help but wish they'd pushed it just a bit further in a few key areas to really make it a must-play. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments if you've played Avowed and what your take is. I'd really like to know. And also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more honest game reviews such as this. Anyways, this has been PC signing out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.